Today's word is meditation. Our affirmation is, I am open to a greater awareness of God within. Meditation restores my soul and re-energizes me. As I turn to the quiet within, I breathe deeply and relax. I clear my mind of all conscious thoughts. Each one is like a leaf gently floating downstream. I may focus on a word or a phrase as a mantra of peace. As I become still, my mind and heart open to a greater awareness of God. In the stillness, peace and love surround me. I transcend the external world and enter a light-filled space of tranquility and understanding where I receive the blessings of God. As I close my time in meditation, I gently pull myself back from the solitude of the silence. I gradually become aware of sounds around me. Revitalized, centered, and peaceful, I return to the activities of the day. Our scripture is from Psalms 49, verse 3. The meditation of my heart shall be understanding. Let us acknowledge this sacred moment by singing Surely the Presence.
There's a holy hush around us. I see glory on each face. Surely the presence of the Lord is in this place.
Indeed, God is present here and now, and in that awareness, let us pray. Father, Mother God, we give thanks for this opportunity to be open to the awareness of your presence, to allow your love to flow through us into this moment, to allow that process to heal us, lift us, transform this moment, as it surely will. And for those in our awareness who seem to have a need for the awareness of your love here and now, let us hold them in consciousness and let us see them blessed and lifted, healed, and made whole, transformed, that they may step into their lives with greater confidence, with greater awareness, with greater compassion. For this opportunity to be the ministers of your word, we give thanks. So it is that together we say, Amen. The world in a grain of sand. By the way, happy Day of the Dead. For those of you with Catholic background, you know that the All Saints Eve, or the All Hallows Eve, and then All Saints Day and Day of the Dead are 3 consecutive days that, it turns out, are now placed on October 31, November 1, November 2. And the Day of the Dead is honoring those upon whose shoulders we have stood, those who have survived to that age of procreation, that have allowed us through their cunning and through their skill to be born. So we celebrate, acknowledge, and lift up. Well, it turns out that the Day of the Dead works very well with the topic of the talk today, because the topic of the talk today is about chaos in our lives. We've been working with the 7 life lessons of chaos, and the 5th life lesson of chaos is appreciating the chaos that is in our life. We have had the opportunity to, I think in the past, realize in any particular moment. This may not be the way I want it to be, but wow, this is cool. This is pretty. This is a nice day today. Everything is working as it should, even though it surprises me that it is as it is. When we look at when we look at chaos, when we study chaos, and we offer and we explore the images that have come out of the study of chaos, we have seen. I'm sure that you all have seen it. Certainly, some of you have seen it because last week I used these images. But this is referred to as the Mandelbrot set. It speaks of the complexity on the complex numbers plane, and it allows us to see at various levels in this, as we drill down into a particular point, we come up with greater and greater detail, if you will. And at each level, there is this beauty that is inherent in this mathematical representation of chaos. Well, what I'd like to do today is to look at the beauty at various levels in our lives and to appreciate the chaos that is in our lives. How many of you have had the experience, and it may have been a long time ago, or it may have been this morning, of just laying back and watching the clouds roll by? Right? I mean, I think that every child has had that experience at one point or another. Well, as I was driving in this morning, I was thinking about that idea of just laying back and looking at the clouds. And it reminded me to look at the clouds. And as I was going up the hill on Highway 93 out of South Boulder and turning left on 128, there in front of the sun was this montage of both bulbous and wispy clouds. It was really quite beautiful. And had I not had the commitment to be here earlier and to change my schedule before we get started in the morning, I would have stopped and just appreciated them. But nonetheless, seeing those clouds, I mean, the sun was partially obscured, and in the wispy fringes of the clouds, there was a tinge of rainbow. You've seen that, I'm sure, that beauty. Well, that moment just opened up for me, right? Because I chose to turn my attention to the beauty that was there. And the interesting thing is that the clouds are the organic representation of chaos. I mean, there is pattern, there is integration, but nonetheless there is disorder and unpredictability, which is the character of chaos. I mean, we see the pattern, we see the integration in the Mandelbrot set, but at the same time we see that there is an unpredictability to it, because as we drill down into greater and greater levels within the Mandelbrot set, we see a different kind of pattern, a repetition of that first double globe pattern at many levels, but nonetheless we see this wow, look at that, oh wow, look at that, as we continue to explore. Well, what I'd like to suggest, or what I will suggest, whether you like it or not, I will suggest this, and whether I like it or not, because it's in my notes that I'm supposed to suggest this, but I suggest that our lives are exactly like that. That as we look, as we stop and allow ourselves to appreciate what's going on right now, we can see the beauty of it, even though it seems to be chaotic. Consider, for example, the events of your life. Okay? You've got your day timer all set up. Tuesday comes around, and you've got these appointments, and you may get an email. You may not get an email. You may get a phone call or not. But some of those people may not show. Oh my God, what's going to happen to my day timer? That meeting was important because the outcome of that meeting was going to feed my meeting in the afternoon, and the meeting in the afternoon was to allow me to write the reports on Tuesday night that were going to be on my boss's desk on Wednesday morning. Now what do I do? Chaos. Well, in that realization that we don't have to be attached to the outcome of any particular plan. I mean, when we make plans, God laughs, right? So when we recognize that, okay, I anticipated that meeting was going to go as planned. I anticipated that we were going to have some outcome that was going to then allow me to continue my work. If we're not attached to that, it allows us to step back and perhaps explore other options. Well, this person was going to give me some input, but who else can give me input? This person was going to fulfill these responsibilities, but are those responsibilities really necessary for me to get my task done? Okay, these are questions that we can open ourselves to, and if we are willing to explore, if we're willing to drill down, if you will, if we're willing to look at all of the things that seem to be happening in a chaotic way, if we're willing to consider those, we just might find a beautiful pattern with the fringes with rainbows. We just might find that there's an opportunity to develop a new relationship that we hadn't even considered before. Because instead of Fred having the responsibility and the input for me, maybe Martha is going to. And I haven't worked with Martha much, but this would be a good opportunity to see how she can contribute to this particular project. So if we are willing to step back from our expectations that have not yet been met or aren't being met, it just might be that we will discover a new level, a new organization, a new integration that will be beautiful. Okay? So, let's look at this. Out of Genesis, we see in Genesis 1, chapter 29 to 31, God said, "See, I have given you every plant yielding seed that is upon the face of all the earth, and every tree with seed in its fruit. You shall have them for food. And to every beast of the earth, and to every bird of the air, and to everything that creeps on the earth, everything that has been has the breath of life, I have given every green plant for food." And it was so. God saw everything that he had made, and indeed it was very good. Now you know that I don't look at this literally. Okay? I see Genesis as a metaphorical statement of our arising from unconsciousness to consciousness. I see the whole Old Testament as an evolution of our consciousness from the very incidental waking up all the way through to that realization of the Christ light. Okay? So I see the Old Testament as a wonderful allegory, metaphor. And in fact, the metaphysical interpretation of the Old Testament can give us great insight. But here in this allegory, this is an important statement because it is saying to us that here is the creation unfolded before you. You have access to it. You can interact with it. It has value. It will nourish you. And it is good. Regardless of what our expectations are, regardless of our daytimer getting all exploded because of some unmet expectation, it's all good. We've heard that aphorism before, haven't we? It's all good. But do we really, really believe that, or is that just an excuse that we have for not getting totally pissed off about the incidents that have arisen? Well, when we look at creation and look at the levels of creation, there's, we've had wonderful truths passed down to us from various spiritual traditions, from various literary traditions. And at the turn of the 19th century, William Blake, offered this poem. It turns out this particular poem was not printed, it was not published until 60 years after it was written. 60 years after it was written. But at the beginning was something that you'll recognize. To see a world in a grain of sand and a heaven in a wildflower, hold infinity in the palm of your hand and eternity in an hour. Think about that imagery. What is this telling us? It's telling us about the multiple levels of existence, the multiple levels of creation. This is referring both to the physical and to the temporal, the physical, the matter, as well as time. But think of it more allegorically. It's talking about our perception. It's talking about the levels of our perception. For instance, when we look upon the chaos of our lives, we typically focus on events, right? This was supposed to happen, it didn't happen. I didn't think about that happening, but it did happen. This, our allegorical daytimer has things popping in and dropping out of it continuously. I mean, that's what makes life interesting, isn't it? If we could actually wake up in the morning and define exactly what was going to happen during the day and come to the end of the day and see that everything that we had defined exactly happened as we anticipated, how boring would that be? To see a world in a grain of sand. To realize that what we perceive has multiple levels. And to be willing to explore those multiple levels of perception and see how that affects our lives. Just like the Mandelbrot set allows us to drill down into the complexity of the complex number plane, this poem tells us that it's levels of perception that we need to be aware. Each level of perception has a greater, not necessarily a greater, but certainly an inherent beauty in and of itself. So let's take a look at those levels of perception. We're familiar with the chaos in our lives, and the chaos in our lives is dependent upon the events. Well, let's go down one step further. Now, how do we respond to those events? Okay? We see the events. Now let's take a little step inside and say, okay, now how am I responding to those events? Am I attached to this event occurring? And if I'm attached to this event occurring, how am I responding to that unmet expectation? So we can now explore our expectations and our relationship to the events of our lives. All right, that's one level. Let's take another level now. Okay, we have our response to the events, but now we have relationships. Oh, those muddy relationships. I expected this person to do this person didn't do that, and, I'm upset about it. Well, okay, so we've got the relationships now. We see the relationships, and the people are doing things as expected and not doing things as expected. They're doing surprising things, and they're doing predictable things. But nonetheless, we can't predict with anyone, with any of our relationships. We cannot predict and say 100% this is going to happen. That level of perception about our relationships, and then the next level down, our response to those relationships, right? So we've got the events of our lives, we've got the response to the events of our lives, we've got the relationships, we've got the response to the relationships. Here's a hard one. You ready for this one? Perceiving our thoughts. Keeping aware of our train of thought. A train of thought is a great allegory because it implies that we can just jump on and write it wherever it goes. But the reality of it is that we're not on defined tracks. It's more like we're in an ATV in the open desert. And at any particular point in time, we can change our direction. We don't have to follow the train. We're riding an ATV. And boy, this is fun. I'm going lickety-split across the desert, right? Well, our train of thought is really an ATV of thoughts. And the ATV of thoughts is something that we can control. We've got the control. We've got our hands on the wheel, hopefully. If we're going lickety-split, we'd better have our hands on the wheel. But we've got the hands on the wheel. And we are able to, at any particular point in time, shift, redirect, re-respond. Okay, so we've got our realm of thoughts, a perception of our thoughts. And now we have even one more level. And that level is the response to our thoughts. Okay? How do we respond to our thoughts? Oh, I wish that person were dead. Oh God, I don't want to do. I don't want to say that. That's terrible. Well, we've got our thoughts, and then we've got our response to our thoughts, and we can perceive all of these levels, and we can appreciate all of these levels. We don't have to be attached to any particular outcome on any particular level. In fact, if we're not attached to the outcome on any particular level, we just might find that our lives are full. Our lives are filled with anticipation, not expectation, anticipation. The difference being whether you're attached to the outcome. But our lives can be filled with anticipation and celebrate the surprises and celebrate the differences and celebrate each and every aspect of each and every moment that we are awake. And I'm guessing each and every moment that we are asleep. Because as we set the frame of our consciousness, we are transforming our lives. We had a wonderful discussion yesterday in the Philosopher's Stone, the men's group that gets together on the first, third, and fifth Saturdays over at La Dolce Vita. We had a great discussion about intentions. And we explored intentions as in the Socratic method, right? I mean, that was what we learned about the Socratic method. The Socratic method is exploration of a topic through questions. And so we had this wonderful, hour and a half discussion, half an hour before we got into it. But we had this wonderful discussion about intentions. And it became apparent that intentions are a means of setting our frame of consciousness. Setting the frame of consciousness allows us to perceive our relationship at each of these levels in a way that is harmonious with our intention. Does that make sense? That is, we set our intention to be loving in this moment. That loving intention colors our relationship, colors our response to the events, colors our thoughts and our response to the thoughts. It literally transforms our life in that moment when there is that intention versus this intention. Okay? So the choice of the intention establishes the frame of our consciousness, and the frame of our consciousness is the ground from which we interact at each of these levels of perception. We have the choice. Not yet, band. The band told me that when I use the word "it's your choice," that's when they come out. And I said, it's wonderful because that word is actually the most important word that I use in any of my talks. But not yet. So we have the choice of how we're going to intend setting the frame from which we will respond on each of these levels of perception. It makes sense? Now, the word for today is meditation. The word for today is meditation. And meditation is a means of cleaning the frame of consciousness. Okay? So we cleanse the frame of consciousness to allow us to intentionally reframe our consciousness. Okay? So in this whole allegory, meditation is a means of cleansing the frame of our consciousness. And then there is I'm sure you will be surprised by this next slide, because there is a teaching that Jesus offered us that is a universally applicable intention. You ready for it? Can anybody guess what it is? Of course. Love God with all your heart and love your neighbor as yourself. Establishing that intention will create in your frame of consciousness a solid foundation that will allow you to perceive at each of these levels without attachment to any outcome. You may get attached at some point and say, boy, I really hope that comes to be, and then you just go back to your intention. No, my intention is to love God with all my heart and to love my neighbor as myself. When I establish that as my universal intention, my frame of consciousness allows me, first of all, the frame expands. Okay? I can see greater possibilities in my experience. But furthermore, I can respond to the chaos in my life in a more fulfilling way. That's our choice. That's our choice. We can establish our frame of consciousness as we choose. So what do you choose? We'll have our meditation. I even held up my finger to let you know that this is it. Oh, you're welcome. As we come into our meditation, let's come in with, I cast all my cares.
I cast all my cares on you, God. I cast all my cares on you, and lay all my burdens in your presence. I cast all my cares on you, oh God. I cast all my cares on you, God. I cast all my cares on you. And even when I'm not sure what I should do, I cast all my cares on you, oh God.
Each moment can be a time of meditation. It doesn't need to be 30 minutes or 20 minutes, 10 minutes. It can be just a time of opening and releasing. Releasing the attachments of the moment. Taking a breath. Breathing in and appreciating this life force that is available to us. Breathing out and realizing our relationship in this web of life. Breathing in, appreciation. Breathing out, appreciation. Just a few intentional, conscious breaths can clear the frame of consciousness. And allow us to reestablish our love of God, our love of our neighbors, reestablishing our frame of consciousness. And in just such a short time, we can ready ourselves for this moment, to step into the moment in love, because we have allowed the love to be there through us in this experience. And as we come back into this time and space, let us come back sharing the words of the Lord's Prayer.
Our Father, which art in heaven, hallowed be thy name. Thy kingdom come, thy will be done in earth as it is in heaven. Give us this day our daily bread, and forgive us our debts as we forgive our debtors. And lead us not in temptation, but deliver us from evil. For thine is the kingdom, and the power, and the glory,
For those of you in our internet audience, you may also contribute through the donate button at the bottom of the player. Thank you for being with us. As we take our offerings in our hands, let us bless them with this offering statement. Together, please. Divine love blesses and multiplies all that I have, all that I give, and all that I receive. I give in love because I trust in God. And once again, Patty Jackson, Irreverence.